Well, g'day everybody and welcome back to part 2 of putting this big bore kit and performance cylinder head into basket case. Now if you remember in part 1 I had a bit of trouble with the lead in the bottom of the bore and the fact that it just didn't exist anymore, so I've reinstated that, and I've also enlisted the help of a friend. So my mate Richard is coming over to give us a hand. Welcome to Andy's Motorcycle Obsessions. All right, you'll be pleased to know, Richard, that this time I have got blocks of wood there to save your fingers.
I noticed you'd made those. They're pretty nice,
Can you just undo that and feed that up through the high diddly diddle?
Yeah.
I've got the steel bit in there as well. Yep.
Got your dowels in place?
Yes, they are. Now, we should be okay. I've started on my bolts. Are you right? Oh, actually, I'm sitting on my piston. There we go. Yeah. Now we should be able to just tap him down. Oh, yeah, baby.
Beautiful.
Now hold it there. We'll get the clamps off, and try not to scratch shit out of the piston doing it. A lot better with a lead. I tell you, I was sitting there struggling.
Yeah.
I probably nearly could have done a little man. Anyway, it's good to have help.
Yeah.
I don't care if we destroy them. There we go. Got it off.
It's one less thing to be.
Take the wood out. You have to go up a bit, mate.
Up a bit.
Yep, that's it. All right, let's guide them in. Okay, mine's starting. Hang on, bottom oil ring. Oh no, we're right. Yep, we're right. Okay, stop. Mine's in. Is yours in? Yours isn't as low as mine.
No, I think I might want to go a little bit further.
There you go. There you go.
There we go.
Let's get them off. That one's easy, just should have thought of that before. Yeah, take it up onto the cast iron section.
Yeah, that's what I did last.
Mm.
Just got to undo it.
You alright?
Yeah.
Yeah, yours is a bit longer than mine. That's something you don't want to hear, boys. Yours is a bit longer than mine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Let's just try and gently bring it down. What are we hitting on? That's all good. That's all good. It's just the cast iron part going into the. Just have to make sure we rock it around. And,
Oh yeah.
yep.
Here we go.
Right.
Well, that was easy. Oh, we're not quite there.
No, we're not quite there yet, but that's okay.
The dowel to go.
Little bit of wood. It's only that. It's just that.
You go.
Yeah, the dowel.
Yeah, the dowel. Come a little bit.
Going down.
Yeah, you're there, I think. Pretty much.
Sorry, mate. You're right. I think we're there. I can feel the bounce.
Yeah.
Lovely. Get you some of that.
Two.
There we go, mate. How's that? We now have.
Pretty dandy.
We now have
1100 cc's.
1179 cc's.
Yeah. Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
With shiny new pistons. All right. Nice and snug over those studs. Push down all the dowels. Happy days. All right.
Beautiful.
I'll hold that. You want to go grab the head?
Do that right. Yeah, I've got it.
Have you got it?
Yeah.
I'm glad you got gloves on because I freaking haven't put them on.
You got.
We need
to.
We need to take the head forward, cord up back. Right. And have you got that wire still?
Yeah. So I thought. No. Yes. Only just. Yeah. Now I have.
All right. Okay. Let's gently ease this head over. Right, I'll start on the studs. Are you start on the studs?
No. Yeah,
Right.
cam chain just in the right place? No, it must be. It's really there.
Yes, mate, it's all there. Feel through the front. One cylinder head. How much horsepower did we just put in there, Ollie?
Maybe 10. Or a bit more, perhaps.
I'm hoping it's more than 10.
How many horsepower did you put on with the carburetors?
Well, that's right, I don't know.
Probably put 20 on it.
Now, just a hot tip here and a trap for young players, including me. Yep, when you pull the head off, and Steptoe, who's got his own XS1100 YouTube channel, Steptoe's XS, I think it's called, pointed out to me, he's been working on XS1100s for a lot longer than I have, when you remove the cylinder head, you shouldn't release the main acorn nuts prior to releasing the two small ones under here. These are two on the studs. Yeah, on the cam chain tunnel. They should be released first, because the consequence is that you put the head under a lot of strain right through that part of the block, and it's not the strongest part of the block, and you can actually crack your cam chain tunnel, and that can present as an oil leak that you think is associated with your chain tensioner, but it can be a hairline crack in the block. I didn't get this one. Yeah, so and I've fallen for it myself, where I've released the cylinder head bolts, the main through bolts, prior to releasing those two M8 nuts. So we're on 25 now. I'll just run back over them, working from the middle out in a cross type pattern.
You have to retension these?
Yeah, once you've run it, put it through a heat cycle or two, let it cool right down and retension it. Hey presto, Brian.
Presto.
Look at that.
Beautiful. Beehives, big bores.
Beehives, big
Big
bores,
valves.
big valves.
Continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement. Now there's an interesting concept, Ollie.
Yeah.
Actually continually improving, outdoing it, instead of sitting in a meeting room freaking talking about
Yeah,
it.
this is it.
No.
Do it. Not
Anyone out there experience that?
Any other cynical old bastards around?
Any other cynical old bastards? Right, so that was great. Richard, thank you very much for your help. Now this is a bit that could potentially bring me undone, because I'm going to put the cams and the buckets and everything in, but I don't know what I've got in terms of valve clearances. Now, Schumann Motorworks, when they fit the valves, they set the valve height back to whatever Yamaha originally set them at, but I don't know. I mean, I've got enough buckets here to do enough shims, to do the job, but the whether they're the right size is going to be the thing that could bring me unstuck. I might have to end up ordering some more. So I've dropped a shim into each bucket. Just pop some camshafts in now, and start thinking about how that all needs to look. Right, so that timing mark is roughly at the top. This timing mark is roughly at the top. Right, so that's the exhaust cam sitting up in there. and I've got the timing mark aligned. Obviously I still haven't tightened this, put a bolt in this one yet. This guy here has to come back a bit, but I'm just going to put the bearing caps on. So I have the crankshaft on top dead centre. Just take these down a little bit. People are going to cane me. Oh, you should have done it this way, you should have done it that way. This is the way I do it. Doesn't mean it's right. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that back till it's on, aligned with the timing mark. So the exhaust and the intake are now aligned with the timing. Right, so the cams are both sitting in there on the timing marks. Just bringing this exhaust cam chain around to the right spot, and that's about it. Pop that in. Guide. Chuck a bolt to hold it in there. Lovely. Right, throw some more bearing housings on. Right, so we've got to pull these down to 10 Newton meters. I'm going to set my trusty low range quarter drive torque wrench, 10 Newton meters. So this one goes from 2 to 10, 2 to 24, and you work from the centre out so that you don't. I've already got one. 10 is about what you do by hand anyway. You work from the middle out to try and not bend the camshaft. Alright, so now what we want to do is press that spring in just so it holds it there. Okay, and then we need to fit a new gasket, and then we bolt him in place. Alright, not sure whether or not you can see, but you should be able to hear a resounding thunk. There it is. So that is now tightened up on the chain. I'm just going to nip that up for now. Alright, so that was a very productive day, and in no small part thanks to Richard. So what I've done though is I've thrown a heap of random buckets, random shims into the buckets just as a starting point, because you can't rotate those cams just on the buckets or with no buckets. So I've put buckets, shims in there, and I've recorded what size shim I've got in which cylinder on the intake and the exhaust, just as a starting point. So we're starting from 0 here. So now I need to go through and see if there's any clearance at all, and if there is, we can work with that. And if there isn't, well then I'm going to obviously have to remove the shim and replace it with a much smaller one, and then until we can get a measurement. And then I need to make sure that I've got the right size shims to do the job, because it's I might end up having to order shims, and that'll set me back another week. But let's go and take some measurements and see where we're at. All right, so now let's add some confusion to the mix. In 1980, they changed the spec on the intake. They actually reduced it. But I'm not going to put it to that specification, because knowing what I know now about what duration the cams have got and the changes that they made, this is still the earlier camshaft, 1979 model. So it's got a longer duration, and I'm going to keep the wider clearances. It's safer anyway. And the clearances are one on the intake is 0.16 of a millimetre to 0.2 of a millimetre, which is about 7 to 8 thou. I don't have a 0.16 millimetre feeler gauge, but I've got a 0.15 and I've got a 0.2. So I'm going to try the smallest one first. Doesn't even look like going in there. So obviously we're too tight. Now I'll go down. I'll just pick a smaller one. This one's 0.8 of a millimetre or 3 thou. Oh, that's not going in either. What's the smallest one I've got? I've got to try and get a measurement on it. Smallest one I've got is 0.04 of a millimetre. And that doesn't fit either. So we assume 0. Exhaust, let's just... yeah, see, I can't even get that in the exhaust one either. That's 0.0. So we assume 0 on number 1. Now that's sitting with it on top dead centre number 1. All you got to do is make sure that the base radius of the cam is above the bucket when you're measuring it. So there's no real science in where it has to be. So if I rotate this around, I now have the base circle for number 2 sitting on the exhaust one for clearance and also on the intake. So let's see if we can slip anything through that one. Assume 0 on the exhaust. We got clearance, and I've just fitted the 0.04 of a millimetre one through there. So let's see if we can go up a couple of sizes. This is 0.06. Alright, so 0.06 slides through. 0.08 fits through. 0.1's starting to get close. That's 4 thou. 0.13, which is 5 thou, is a bit tight. Alright, so it's 4 thou on the intake, or 0.1 of a millimetre on the intake of number 2. Number 4, so let's measure him. Assume 0 for number 4. Let's have a look at number 3. Buckets of clearance on number 3. Let's go up to close to spec. 0.2 of a millimetre is the top end of the spec on the intake, and that flies through. Alright, so interestingly, number 3 cylinder is 0.35 of a millimetre on both the intake and the exhaust. Alright, so now we have some numbers. Let's go to the whiteboard and see what we need to do. Alrighty, so these are intake clearances as specified by the factory. 0.16 of a millimetre to 0.2 of a millimetre on the inlet, intake, and this is the exhaust. So 0.21 to 0.25. We have 0, 0. We've only got 3 valves, 2 intake and 1 exhaust that we actually have a measurement on. So assuming 0 here, we need to come back a minimum of 0.2 of a millimetre to give us clearance. So we need a minimum of a 2.6 and a minimum here of a 2.6 to bring the 25 back to try and get some clearance, assuming that there's not a lot more room, but we basically need to go the other way now to put a much thinner shim in there and try and get some sort of a measurement. On the ones we do have measurements for, we know that we've got 0.1 of a millimetre, and we need to go 0.6 to 0.1 of a millimetre bigger in gap to bring the clearance right. So we need a 2.4 or thereabouts to start getting a clearance. Right, so what I've done is I've taken a very thin shim, which was a 2.40, out of the intake on number 3 because we knew that it was huge. So we now put this at the bottom of its stroke, install our bucket retaining tool, then being careful to wind it back in the other direction. We bring it to the top and then try and remove that existing shim. A tiny little screwdriver. And a piss weak little magnet. Now this is another thing I get caned for, using magnets. Basically, the risk is that you could magnetise the bucket. I've never had any issues doing it, but if you're not comfortable doing it, don't do it, is my advice. Okay, so we had a 2.80 in there, and we assume 0, and we want to give a clearance of 0.2 of a millimetre. So theoretically we should go to a 2.6 as a starting point, but I'm going to go even smaller. I've got a 2.5 millimetre shim here. Wind it back the other way so we don't crash the cam lobe into the bucket holding tool. Right, then we can remove our bucket holding tool. Just give it a revolution to make sure it's all happy and seated. Push it through. All right. Somewhere there will do. Let's see if we've got any clearance at all. So this is the bottom end of the scale at 0.15. Yay, it fits. Now the hope is that the 0.2 of a millimetre one, which is the top end of the tolerance, oh, that's money. But that's very high. I mean, I could come back another 0.5 of a millimetre, which would be a 0.05 millimetre, which would be a 0.45 shim, which I do not own. Righto, so number one is now 0.2 of a millimetre. Now the exhaust, again, was huge, and the exhaust had a 2.85 millimetre shim in there, and we need to bring it back so that it's got 0.2 to 0.25 of a millimetre clearance. So let's see what we can do with that. Now if the measurements are worn off it, like this one, if the printing of the measurements worn off, you can use an outside micrometer to check the size, and this one is 2.8, so that's going to be too thick anyway. We'll put a 265 in there and see how we go. So that's 0.2 of a millimetre thicker, thinner than what was in there. Wind him back down. You got to be careful here because you don't want to wind the cam lobe into that bucket holding tool because you break your cylinder head. Again, give it a revolution. Make sure the bucket's seated. The shim is seated. No, still too tight. So that's a 0.2 and that's the minimum clearance. Let's see if we can measure anything. Well, so about 0.15, which means we've got to go 0.05 of a millimetre smaller than that one. So we need to do it again. So we need 0.2 to 0.25 basically. So a minimum of 0.2, yes, and a maximum clearance of 0.25. Now the thing is that these things are only going to get tighter as they go, so you're better off going for the top of the clearance. This is 2.25, or it's firm, so it'll be in the 0.23 to point somewhere there. So I'm going to call that spot on. So number one, we now have the correct clearances on both. I just got to work my way through all of those now, and I won't bore you shitless doing that, and I'll let you know how we come out of it. Alright, so what was the wash up? I had enough shims to do all of the valves bar one. I'm going to have to order one shim for the intake on number 4. But that's okay. It'll mean I'll set it back a few days. What I can do now though is just throw all the ancillaries on, so put all the carburetors back on, exhaust pipe, everything else, and basically just have that one shim to go and we'll be right. Oh, bloody. Right, let's just keep the dust out. So that's about as far as I can go now until I get that other shim. So now we wait.